What's the best movie I saw in June? What's the worst movie I saw in June? What am I doing here? We'll answer those questions. What is up, Flick fans? Welcome back to my channel. Happy 4th of July weekend. Today we're talking all the movies that I saw in the month of June. I think I saw like 13, so it's pretty good. Just want to say thanks for joining me. Thanks for being here, and how do you like the set? It's a work in progress. We're getting there. If you guys are here and you enjoyed this video, let me know with a thumbs up down below and leave your comment. What's a movie I missed and what's the best movie you've seen this month? I'm leaving all of the links to my reviews from June in the description just in case you missed one. All right, just a few notes about this list. I saw 2 movies that I'm not including, and those 2 movies are Theater Camp and Past Lives, because I just saw Past Lives. I haven't been able to review it, and Theater Camp drops in July. But there is a movie that I believe came out in like May that I missed, and I said, you know what? We're going to include it on this list, and that is Blackberry. I had to talk about Blackberry, not the phone, but it's about the phone. The film stars Jay Baruchel and Glenn Howerton. Howerton gives one of the best performances of the year. I kid you not. It's absolutely phenomenal, and a lot of people are comparing this to Air, which I think is, I guess, a valid comparison, but at the same time, I'm like, yeah, it's just because it's 2 behind-the-scenes stories, and understandable. But this story is so unique, and what Matt Johnson does behind the camera, bringing a real cool style to the rise and fall of the BlackBerry device, something that I never knew I was as interested in as I actually was while watching this film, because it affected us. Everybody I knew in the business world had a BlackBerry. My dad had a BlackBerry. His brothers and cousins and my uncles, everybody who was in the 20s and 30s who worked for a business had a BlackBerry at one point, and then all of a sudden they were gone. All right, that's an interesting story. It all comes down to how are you going to construct that? Are you going to make it even more interesting than it already is through filmmaking? And yeah, I think the movie does that.
Oh, good for you.
I thought Blackberry really worked, and I genuinely had a great time watching. I believe it's a great movie. It's going on the great tier. Then we have the sequel to a movie on Netflix that I thought was good. Nothing spectacular about it other than the action sequences, which were great. It's just, I don't know if the story resonated with me as much as I needed it to, and there wasn't quite enough action to compensate for a lack of a really compelling story. That being said, I enjoyed Extraction 1. I was looking forward to the sequel. And then I saw the sequel, and it was really freaking great. It was one of the more entertaining movie experiences I've had all year, and it's a Netflix film, so I watched it at home. Imagining watching Extraction 2 on the big screen makes me jealous for the people who were able to do that. Why can't I watch this on the big screen?
I can't.
I've always wanted Hemsworth to find that role outside of Thor, and I'm talking more Oscar-wise, but I think he's done that with Extraction 2 when it comes to the action and becoming an action star. And I'm not making comparisons to John Wick, okay? I think everybody's done that in their Extraction 2 review. But he has that iconic feel to him now as a lead action character, to where if we get 2 more sequels and they're great, people will be able to put him in the same conversation. Now, I don't love Extraction 2 as much as I love John Wick Chapter 4, but I do think it's really fun, and Sam Hargrave behind the camera, the one take was just, it was so freaking good.
It was perfect.
But it's action-packed from start to finish. There is non-stop action in this movie. So when the story is maybe not as good as it needs to be and the villain's a little more on the generic side, doesn't matter. Every 5 minutes we're getting a scene that is so memorable from that standpoint. Some people see it as repetitive. I see it as great. So I'm putting Extraction 2 on the great tier. We're off to a good start. Then we have Jennifer Lawrence, No Hard Feelings. I did a short review on this, not that I didn't have much to say, but it's one of those comedies where you know what works, you know what doesn't. The 2 leads, Lawrence and Andrew Barth Feldman. Feldman plays it straight. He is no nonsense. He's just kind of this dude who's a little awkward. His parents are trying to set him up, and, you know, they want him to go out and have some sex.
Ew! Dude! What the?
Jennifer Lawrence says, I can do that, but you have to give me your car. So she schemes with the parents, and there's obviously this trajectory that this story is on. It all just depends on what the character of Percy does or how he does it. And that relationship is the absolute scene stealer, show stealer between the 2. They are great. Lawrence does a great job in this comedy. Now, the story itself, it is predictable. It's familiar. Didn't do a ton for me, and I didn't laugh as much as I wanted to. I actually think this movie works just as much when it's emotional compared to when it is a comedy. And it feels like those early 2000s comedies in a way, but at the same time, I'm like, man, I really wanted to laugh much more than I actually did. Regardless, I do think this is an okay time. It's going on the okay tier.
Transformers.
That was bad. Transformers Rise of the Beasts. This is a fun movie. This is a film that knows what it is, and it executes on its storyline, and it's one of the better Transformers movies, not that it had a lot of competition. Some of those are the worst blockbusters I've ever seen. I'm getting tongue-tied. Stephen Cable Jr. does a nice job. He didn't bring any flair, any extra style to this film. I do think the in-fight sequence, while ridiculously entertaining, it doesn't have a lot to it in terms of visuals other than the amazing CGI. I thought the cinematography, those things could have been better, but Anthony Ramos does a nice job as our human lead. Couple of surprises in store with him. I thought when the Autobots and the Maximals were on screen together, they were amazing. And they get a fair amount of screen time, but when it comes to the human characters, not that Ramos did a bad job, but in these movies, I could always use less human characters and more robots, more robot fighting. So I do wish they would have focused a little bit more on that. Fun movie, nothing too crazy. It's not one that I'm going to keep in the memory banks for the next couple of months, so I'm going to go okay tier, but that's not a bad thing. Asteroid City, Wes Anderson. This is a stylistic film that works best when it's in Asteroid City in the 1950s and we're getting that colorful, amazing cinematography-filled experience with these wacky and quirky characters as all of these crazy things are happening in the background. And it has a lot to say. I think the themes are there. It's kind of scary how it somewhat relates to things that are happening now behind the scenes. It's well executed in that regard. So I was fascinated when we were there with Wes Anderson's quirky crew in the 1950s. I thought he captured it beautifully. And frankly, I don't have a lot of bad to say about those moments. Now, people were telling me, Austin, the behind-the-scenes things, it's a play within a movie, within a TV show. That's integral to the story, and it is. But I just didn't really resonate whenever that was happening on screen. When we would cut to black and white, I found myself being just a bit too distant from what they were actually trying to convey, and I didn't care as much. I thought Bryan Cranston was great in the role. I thought Willem Dafoe was great in the role, but I'm sitting back going, I'm much less interested in this. Now, the way that they blend the two together in the third act, I thought that worked, and they have a nice use of Margot Robbie in that third act, so that was great. But the overall experience of the two storylines or three storylines meshing together, it didn't quite hit me like I think it hit a lot of others.
I was just kidding. Come on.
Regardless, I think the overall experience is good. I'm going to go good tier. This is a good-looking tier list. The Boogeyman, directed by Rob Savage, starring Sophie Thatcher, who just crushes this lead performance. She is so good, compelling. I liked her family history. I like that they build that up, albeit in a familiar way, but it gets you ready for some scares. There's this evil presence in these two girls' house, and they can't get their father to really pay attention to it. And once he does, is it too late? Do the scary scenes work? I believe some of them do. I'm going to go 50-50, right? They try to utilize jump scares. They don't do as much of that slow build-up that I love, but some of the jump scares, they do work. Others, it just felt a bit too familiar. And the story starts to go off the rails at a point to where I was just so much less interested in what was happening on screen compared to what you were kind of delivering in the build-up and the nice backstory for the characters. I just think the Boogeyman is a missed opportunity, right? It will make you afraid. So in that way, it kind of does its job. And I do believe the way that these scenes were executed, specifically the color palette, right? They use a lot of very vibrant reds in these dark rooms, so that looks pretty good, but all in all, I expected much more from this story. I expected so much more from this script, and I'm going to go the meh tier for the Boogeyman. Then we have Flamin Hot. I didn't review this movie. I just watched it in preparation for this video, and you know what? I had a good time. It starts out so cheesy. I'm like, okay, we've seen this 1,000 times before. It's yet another behind-the-scenes movie. We've had 2 of those this year. This is the 3rd, at least. Maybe there's more. I think this is the 3rd. But once again, the execution, it's so different. It's more quirky. I would say this is more of a TV movie than something like an Air or a Blackberry, and that's not a bad thing. It just feels like you're watching something that's trying to be a little too funny and silly at times. They'll have these moments where something happens on screen, and you're like, wow, did that actually happen? He's like, no, that's not how it happened. Here's how it actually happened. I'm like, that's really familiar, really cliche. So I think the style of this movie did kind of get in the way at times, but I just love this story. When everyone looked down on him, even his family members. Now, his wife is amazing, and I love that relationship, that dynamic with his entire family. They got him to the point, and they were part of the reason why Flamin' Hot Cheetos became a thing. But I look at the way that this story plays out, and it all revolves around his determination, the fact that people looked at him as a guy who couldn't do it, but he did it. It was a beautiful story, and I love the way that it played out, right? So, not a great movie, but I think I enjoyed this so much more than a lot of other people, so I'm going to go Flamin' Hot on the good tier. Yeah. Then we have Elemental, the brand new Pixar film, and I was very worried about this. I don't know if the marketing really did anything for me, and going into this movie, I'm like, all right, the visuals, they're going to be great, but is the story going to work for me? And the visuals, they were not only great, this is one of the best looking movies I've seen all year. Clearly, SpiderVerse, that's the best looking animated movie of the year, but this is close, and I think Elemental captures exactly what it needed to from showcasing all of these different elements and utilizing a different look and feel for each one. Not necessarily a different animation style like a Spider-Verse does, but it still looks great nonetheless. And the backgrounds were beautiful. The characters were gorgeous, man. Is the story good?
Well, we're waiting.
Yeah, I actually think it is. Ember and Wade are really good characters, and the voice cast is awesome, especially Leah Lewis, who steals the show. This is one of those voice performances that is going to be so memorable as time passes. Now, it is a very familiar, easy to pinpoint. You're going to know exactly where this is going, where the characters are going, where the relationship is going, A, B, and C. It's very obvious making those comparisons, and the themes in this film, you knew they were coming from a mile away, but that doesn't make them any less significant than they are in the movie. So while Elemental is not classic Pixar because of those story cliches, I'm still going good tier. I thought it was good. Nimona, another spectacular voice cast. Chloe Grace Moretz and Riz Ahmed. There's something about animation this year where the voice cast is consistently perfect for their roles, and then you look at it visually, and specifically the art style here, it's magnificent. I mean, this movie looks awesome. Like Arcane on Netflix, if you ever watched that show, it has that same style, but the technique used is just slightly different here. But you look at this setting, this futuristic Blade Runner-ish world that they're living in, but it's also medieval. There's knights, queens, kings. That's pretty cool. And I look at the combination of all of those ideas and the fact that these two characters, they're outcasts. They're looked down upon. The idea of acceptance is the main theme at play in this movie. There are other things going on here that I think, work. Other times don't work as much. And I believe this film slows down a bit in the second act and loses sight of what was making it so authentic in the beginning, and then it gets authentic once again at the end, and the ending has a Monsters Inc. / Iron Giant gut punch that works, and I mean it works well, and it does recover from, I believe, a more lackluster second act. Regardless, this is a very different animated movie. If you want something that you haven't seen before and something with a ton of emotion, I think this is the movie for you. I'm going, look at this, man. Good tier for Nimona.
It's beautiful.
Run, Rabbit, Run. Sarah Snook plays a mother. Something weird is happening with her daughter, and her daughter is saying freaky things. She's saying things that don't make sense. Why are you saying that, honey? You're freaking me out. Am I seeing what I'm seeing or not? Am I losing it?
I'm a psycho.
And Snook does a great job. There's a buildup of suspense here that works until it doesn't. There is a story here. The idea, the concept works until the execution fails it. And even though Sarah Snook is giving a great performance, and honestly, I thought the young actress that played the lead girl, she did a nice job as well. And that mother-daughter chemistry or lack thereof is great. That's entertaining. But the way that this story goes, the trajectory, and the lack of answers, I'm okay with an ambiguous ending. I've said that before, but not when you don't get anything of any significance. You're not satisfied in the least bit. I was pretty upset when this movie ended, and that's why I'm going bad tier. It was annoying.
It's the biggest piece of dog shit.
Okay, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. I just talked about this yesterday. Won't say too much more, but I was conflicted, man. I walked out of the theater feeling one way, and I still feel that way, but I slightly moved in more of a positive direction because I realized that this is a look at an older Indiana Jones. Not everyone's going to like that, but where he is in his life, I don't know why, but it resonates with me. My wife always says I'm older at heart, but I think Indiana Jones, his story, specifically his arc in this movie is great, and a lot of that has to do with Harrison Ford. A lot of that has to do with James Mangold. But then I look at the other side of things, and James Mangold did not bring what Steven Spielberg has brought to all these movies, even Crystal Skull, which isn't good, but Spielberg still brings that magic, and Mangold brings a little bit of magic, but feels like more of a dull and bland blockbuster from a visual perspective, so that was kind of disappointing. And then you look at the trajectory of the overall story and how it goes, where it goes in the third act, and not everyone's going to love that. I actually didn't hate that. I like the fact that it takes a risk, but at the same time, I look at the silliness of other moments, specifically the fact that our two main characters, they don't die for some reason. I mean, how do they not die in this movie?
Why can't you just die?
How are they constantly avoiding bullets when they run that slow? Regardless, I think I enjoyed this more than other people, and surprisingly, I'm going good tier. Look, I don't think it's a really good movie. I think it's a pretty good movie, but I just feel like that's where it belongs on my list. Let's talk about a movie that is not divisive. The Flash. I think there were a lot of factors at play with the poor box office. Obviously, what happened with Ezra Miller, and you can't tell me that's not a factor when I know like 3 or 4 people in my everyday life who do not pay attention to movies that refuse to see this movie because of Ezra Miller. And that's just random people in Kentucky, all right? Then you have the announcement of the reset of the DCEU and poor marketing, in my opinion. There were just a lot of things at play. All of that being said, and the fact that this movie does not have the best CGI in the third act, I will be the first to admit that. And that did, when I first watched it, I'm like, that's not great. That looks bad.
What the f*** is this?
But there are other moments that utilize CGI where things look less realistic, and I felt like that was intentional. I felt like that was what it was supposed to look like, and they clearly, in my opinion, I know some people were up in the air about that, I thought they clearly did that on purpose, so I'm not sure why that's a debate. You may not like the way it looks, understandably so, but that was intentional. So I was having a pretty good time in the third act of the movie, pushing aside the CGI, and I was also having a pretty good time with the arc of the Flash. This is a character that I haven't really responded to on that level prior to this film. I'm like, all right, I've got to give it up to Andy Muschietti for doing a nice job behind the camera here when it comes to the story progression, the way he handles the actors, and the way he handles Batmen. There are 2 of them, the Batmen. Ben Affleck's great in this film. I thought the suit looked terrible, but he is great. Michael Keaton is excellent in this movie. I like Supergirl. I thought she was underutilized. They could have done more with her character, but I really liked the way she played a role, especially when Barry's story culminates, and the emotional touch with the mother, right? There are questions that are unanswered, like why didn't he just go after the murderer instead of, but I still thought it was a good time. I had a good time watching this. I had a good experience in the theater, and I'm going to put The Flash on the good tier. Last but not least, I don't need to spend a lot of time on this. Why would I do that? You all know how I feel about Into the Spider-Verse. You know it. Across the Spider-Verse. Got the name wrong again. They're both spectacular. They're spectacular films. Miles Morales' story in this movie. I didn't know if they could expand upon him further. I didn't know if I could like him more than I liked him in the first movie. But I do. But not only Miles, it's Gwen. It's all of the Spider people that somewhat get the spotlight. They come in and they just have all of these moments. And the fact that they fit so much story into this movie is insane to me. But it works, and it's that frantic Lord Miller style of storytelling. No, they didn't direct the film, but they had a huge, heavy hand in it. Obviously, it's going to remind you of the Lego movie, but the fact that it's with Spider-Man, the fact that they are going through the multiverse, we get those live-action references, but we also get all of these animated characters with different, unique styles. It's the best-looking animated movie I've seen in years. Like, years and years and years. It'll be in the conversation for one of the best animated movies ever from a visual perspective, and maybe from a quality perspective. It's a spectacular Spider-Man. It's a spectacular movie. It's going on the awesome tier. That was easy. Before I give you my actual ranking, if you enjoyed this video, let me know down below. And like I said, all of my reviews are in the description just in case you missed one, and the ones I didn't do reviews for, sorry. At the bottom, Run Rabbit Run. It's not very good. On the meh tier, it is the Boogeyman, and then we move into the okay tier, and I'm gonna go Transformers. That was still bad. In front of No Hard Feelings, if it'll let me. At the bottom of the good tier, nothing against it, but I am going to go Indiana Jones, followed by Flamin Hot, which almost... Okay.
Would you settle down?
Which almost beat Asteroid City. Then we have Elemental. I think Nimona is the superior animated movie. But I am going to surprisingly go The Flash at the top of the good tier. I enjoyed that experience. On the great tier, it is Extraction 2 and Blackberry. That's the right order. And come on. You know what's at the top. You know. Thanks so much for watching this video. Thanks for being here. What else? Stay tuned. More videos to come. I'm going to be talking about my best movies of the year so far, so you may want to come back. I'll see you soon.